Hello and welcome to the Truth from the Stand Deer Hunting Podcast. I'm your host, Clint Campbell, and you're listening to episode number 36. Today, John and I are catching up on our Montana trips and the opening of our whitetail seasons and the hunt for the deer I call Lucky. So stay tuned. All right, welcome back to another episode of the Truth from the Stand Deer Hunting Podcast. I'm your host, Clint Campbell, and as always, I'm joined by my brother from another mother, Mr. John Utah Mulligan. How's it going, man?
Hey, what's up, dude?
Do you like the fake fanfare that I threw in there, the little crowd noise?
That was you almost had me convinced there was like a crowd of people, like of one or two, cheering for me.
I started. People don't know, but we record this in front of a live studio audience. It's an audience of. I have 3 bar stools here on my side.
Yeah.
I have a bar full of liquor that I'm staring at. They seem pretty engaged, though. I got to tell you, they seem pretty attentive.
Oh yeah, chomping at the bit.
Yeah. So today, well, first off, what's going on with you, man? Like, what's going on in the life of, not necessarily hunting related, but the life of Johnny Utah? Anything interesting going on in the personal space?
Yeah, man. Well, my wife's sister from Cincinnati, she's in town visiting, and we don't get to see her all that often. So, Aunt Tina is up there playing with the kids and running around and whatnot. So that's been cool. And I just actually got back in town, the day job, the Wicked Tree Gear day job. Mm-hmm. We just signed with OutTech, a new rep group. And new rep group for us. They're not a new rep group, but anyways, I had some meetings with them in Cleveland for a few days. That was pretty cool to go over the product line and get familiar with those people and their team. They've got a killer team, man. They nice. Full 50 state coverage, and I think there's like 65, 70 reps just on the hunting side, and then they have a whole nother division that's like outdoor, general outdoor related. So. Real fired up about that for to finish out the year with those guys and move into 2018 and beyond. Mm-hmm. So that's been pretty hectic. It caused me to miss the opening day of Iowa's bow opener. But you got to pay the bills, right? You got to work before you play. Yeah,
something like that, man. Missing the opener, that's a bummer. And you had to be in Cleveland. That's like,
I know. Yeah.
I mean, we might lose some listeners here, but as a Steeler fan, that Cleveland, that's a hard pill to swallow.
Well, it's funny because the taxi cab lady, she was, or the Uber lady, she's like, yeah, I don't even admit that I'm a Cleveland Browns fan at all. And I was like, I wouldn't admit that either.
Right. Yeah. I have some good back and forth at the beginning of the year usually with Chad Sylvester, since he's, a native Ohio guy, and he's a Browns fan. Unfortunately, he admits that in public to a degree.
Right.
And he always likes to talk smack at the beginning of the year because the only time they have hope is before the season starts. So I let him have his 5 minutes, and then we play them pretty early in the year. Then we usually shut him down, and then at that point we don't really talk football anymore because there's not much to talk about. Then we turn our focus to deer hunting. So that's what we do. That's how we keep the friendship alive. Yeah. Nice, man. So you got the Aunt Tina in town, man. Does that mean you got some babysitting, some in-house babysitting to where maybe a little bit of free time?
No, not so much. It's last night I think we sat up and watched movies until about 1:00 this morning, and they're. Her and her sister, it's like I said, they only get to see each other a couple times a year. So they're all about, cooking some big meals and curling up on the couch and watching movies like The Notebook and, things like that I have zero interest in even knowing what the movie's about. I've just heard that it's a girl movie and I won't like it.
Right. Yeah.
So that's what they do.
Nice. Speaking of big meals, man, I'm getting ready to, unfortunately, I'm not going to get to hit the timber this weekend, which isn't necessarily a super sad story because the weather's not supposed to be great here. This weekend it's supposed to be kind of warm. But I have a buddy every year we do odd name. We probably could have come up with a better name, but we call it Meat Fest. Not a great name, admittedly. But what we do is every spring, I'll go to his place or he'll come to mine, and then in the fall, vice versa. And we fire up the smoker, and we basically just make a couple different types of meat on the smoker, and we start, cooking early in the morning. That way we have, meats for breakfast and lunch and then dinner.
Sure.
And basically, by 6, 7 o'clock in the afternoon, you're pretty well on your way to the meat sweats. And basically just gorge ourselves. So that's this weekend. We'll be doing some ribs. I make a nice, it's a bourbon. I make a bourbon like barbecue sauce glaze, a homemade one, which is really good.
Yep.
And so we're gonna throw some swine on. We're gonna do some pig candy. I don't know if you ever had pig candy.
No, what is pig candy? I might regret asking, but.
Well, did you ever have, no, it's really thick sliced bacon, and you take it and, ideally you put, what I'll be doing is I'll throw some maple syrup on it, kind of glaze it with that in a pan or, some type of cooking apparatus. And then I'll throw on like the rub that I would use for barbecue. So I make like kind of a mixture of, it's pepper, brown sugar, cayenne, paprika, onion powder, garlic powder, your typical, rub for ribs. You throw a little bit of that on, and then you let it sit in the refrigerator overnight. Then you pull it out in the morning. You throw a little bit more of that and brown sugar on it, and then you crank up the smoker to about 225. Throw it in for 2 hours, and it crisps up and just kind of makes this bacon candy because it gives you that salty but sweet, savory, fatty type of thing.
Yeah.
So
I mean, bacon, maple syrup, barbecue, like. Okay.
Yep.
I'm sold. Yeah. I'm ready to clog arteries.
Right. Exactly. So that's what I'm going to be doing on Saturday. So no whitetail hunting for me. On a personal note, it's funny. I wanted to tell you this story because I was talking to my brother-in-law right before you and I got on, and he was asking me about the Montana trip and stuff, and we were talking a little bit about that, and he's big into training and stuff like that, and. He sometimes has a little bit of a screw loose once in a while where he trains really, really hard. Like he's gone to competitions for like physique and stuff like that. Like a guy he lives at the gym. And so he was like, you know what? He's like, since I got out of the military, he's like, I've been thinking I've been getting a little soft lately, and he lives on his own now. He was, had a live-in girlfriend for a while, but she doesn't live there anymore. And he was like, I felt like I was getting soft. He's like, so I felt like I needed to ratchet up my mental toughness. He's like, I go to the gym. He's like, so physically I'm tough, I'm fit or whatever. He's like, but mentally I just felt like I needed to try to get it back to where I was. He's like, so I shut off all the hot water to my house, and I only take all cold showers now. That way, he's like, first thing in the morning, it's like I'm having to be mentally tough to get through the shower. He's like, and the added bonus is, he's like, when you have a girl that's over, he's like, and you really want her to leave in the morning, she goes to take a shower. She's like, that usually ends pretty quickly. So that's his methodology for moving ladies out of his house and providing himself mental toughness. What's that?
I was just agreeing. Yes.
Yeah. I don't know that I could do that, but it seems so. Anyone out there listening, it's like if you have a house guest that you would like to move along quickly, turning off the hot water might be a move that you could employ. I don't know that I would go that far, but I kind of like the amenity of warm water. I don't know about you.
It's quite nice. It is. Warm water goes a long way, and we can actually as we go into the podcast and we talk about the Montana stuff, I'll share the warm water joys that I was able to find.
Nice. I look forward to hearing that. So I think, I guess we can just kind of jump into it. I mean, I'm sure people aren't tuning in to hear us talk about our family,
pig candy and
pig
Aunt
candy.
Tina.
And crazy brother-in-laws that use the cold water as a way to force the walk of shame to happen earlier in the morning than maybe would usually happen. So, Montana, you mentioned Montana. One of us, so both of us, so for anyone out there who missed it, John and I both had Montana hunts this year. John was hunting antelope, and I was on a mule deer, whitetail, and elk hunt. And we were really hoping to go 2 for 2. Your story, I think, is the much better story. So I think that you should go first. So just give us, I guess, I'm sure I'll have questions as we go, because you and I have had a chance to talk about it a little bit, but we haven't really kind of dove into it. But
sure,
let me know. Let's start with the success version first, and then we'll talk about my failure.
There's a good and a bad to every story.
That's right.
Before we hear about John's antelope hunt, let's hear this week's Whitetail Food Plot Tip of the Week. It's less a tip and more of a testimonial. I've planted my share of food plots over the years, and Mother Nature always has a lot to do with the plot's success and or its failure. Since I've planted my pure attraction plots, fall and late season plot this September, Mother Nature turned off all the water here in Pennsylvania. Most plots would be a complete total loss at this point. To my surprise, though, when I checked on the plot while walking to my stand, the plot looks like it's actually going to be a nice food source during the fall and winter. The rain we just got would definitely help too. That said, I can't control the weather, but I can pick the seed I use, and I'll continue using Whitetail Institute of North America food plot products. If you'd like to learn more about Whitetail Institute products, head over to whitetailinstitute.com. And now back to the show.
So, I went to Montana last year on an antelope hunt, and we've alluded to this, but whenever you plan these hunts ahead of time, it's not like you genuinely know what the weather is going to be. Other than typically this is what the temperature is, but you can't predict rain or wind and that kind of stuff. So last year when I went out there, we had 2 good days and really 2 really crappy days, high wind and rain and whatnot. But this year I went a little bit earlier. The strategy was to try to go before the rut versus last year. That way I wouldn't have as many eyeballs staring at me as I was trying to stalk. And for anybody that might have missed the last podcast where we talked about it, this was a public land bow hunting, no decoys, no water hole, no ground blind, straight up, Cherokee style, take it to them, kind of style of hunting, which is so different than what I'm accustomed to with whitetails, hunting from a tree stand or, even a ground blind.
Right.
So we went out there earlier this year, knew it was going to be hotter. Unfortunately, with all of the fires that were going on out there, the smoke and the haze was really bad. And if you wear contacts, it seems like that smoke finds a way just to lay up underneath your lenses. And my eyes were just on fire midway through the days. But we got after it. We got my buddy Jesse, he went out there with me to run a camera, and really kind of was a knight in shining armor. I had another guy that was supposed to run a camera, and 13 days before the hunt, that whole plan went to pot. Details aren't that important, other than pretty much left me high and dry.
Right.
So Jesse came in, stepped up, and agreed to go out there with me and help me out. So we got on some goats right away. A lot of singles, and that's what we wanted. Well, they weren't herded up, and they weren't chasing, each other around. And, you didn't have the one buck standing over top of his 15 does. But so we got on them pretty good, and huge asset of being out there once before and kind of knowing the areas that I wanted to go ahead of time. That was a huge plus. So that enabled us to get into the hot areas a little bit quicker. Had a couple of really good stalks on day one, and I pulled my shot a little bit. I had a 74-yard shot, and I had the distance, and I torqued a little bit and shot right behind the antelope. And I was like, well, I mean, that was close, and it would have been cool to have gotten that one, but man, wouldn't have been much of a story, to camp out, wake up in the morning, and shoot the first encounter. But then I had another shot that I was perfect left and right on. It was another 70-yard shot, and I was just right underneath this goat, and probably missed him, a couple inches underneath his chest. And I thought, man, I was like, what's going on? So, it's, and when you're out there, you're trying to keep your head in the game, but you're also trying to have fun and take in everything and whatnot. So I was making sure I didn't beat myself up too much. I didn't want to spoil any of my experience, out there. But at the end of the day, you're still kind of beating yourself up because you're like, I had 2 really cool stalks and I missed the shots,
Right. And you're always kind of wondering, if that opportunity is going to come back around, right? It's like, that's one of the worst things is like whenever I'm hunting and it's like, and I get an opportunity, it's like, if I blow the opportunity or something happens, like the first thing I think would be like, is this going to be the only one that I get this year? You know what I mean? Like, did I just blow the one chance I was going to have the, the quote unquote successful hunt? There's a lot of ways to define success, but a harvested hunt.
Right. Yeah. And of course that kind of stuff's running through your head. And, and I'd be lying if I didn't say that I wasn't thinking, well, I came out here last year and I was unsuccessful, am I just meant not to kill an antelope with a bow? Is that just the way it's supposed to be? And,
right.
Really kind of dove back into the whole experience of it all and chalked it up to, hey, I only get to come out here once a year. I'm not going to stand in the batter's box. I'm going to swing away. And if I strike out, I strike out. But the other thing that I learned from last year to this year was I didn't get out of the truck and to go on low percentage stalks. I only got out of the truck and did what I felt were high percentage stalks. Maybe you have a ditch line or an irrigation line, or you have a topography advantage where you can dip into something or pop in over a hill, and they can just see so well, and they move. They're transient creatures. You can spot one over a hill and you go to the other side of that hill and you pop up over and those jokers are already a mile away. And I'm like, they were just there a second ago. But so there was a lot of that kind of stuff. But so we stayed after it. And on day 3, we changed things up. We moved away from Broadus and we went down to a town called Alzada. And on our way back to Broadus.
What part of Montana is this? Are you in eastern?
Southeast.
Southeast, okay.
Yep, southeast corner. Not far from Wyoming at all.
Right, okay.
And so we were kind of around like Powder River and some of that area when we were up around Broadus. But so we went a little further south into or I guess southeast, kind of into Alzada. And didn't see a lot of activity when we were there. So we took some back roads from Alzada back to Broadus instead of taking the highway. And I saw some state ground and some BLM ground along the way. And we're driving and all of a sudden we pop up on this chunk, and I'm talking just like literally hundreds of antelope. Hundreds.
Jeez.
And some of them are on the private and some of them are on the public. And on the private side, the farmer had a bunch of alfalfa. And the ones that weren't in the private, they were wanting to cross the road to go and feed, in that alfalfa that night at last light.
Right.
And there was one antelope in particular when I was glassing. I'm like, Jesse, dude, I was like, check out the cutters on that thing, And I'm such a newbie when it comes to Western game.
Right.
I don't know what is a trophy antelope other than people say if they curl over really good, that's a good thing. And if they've got big cutters, that's a good thing. And up until this point, I thought that there was like an inside spread measurement, like on a whitetail.
Right.
I'm like, he's not really wide, but man, he's got a lot of mass and he curls over a lot and he's got giant cutters. And so we saw him, but we ran out of light.
Right.
And
so how do they assess like the size? Like, I mean, I guess score, but
according to the Boone and Crockett measuring, there's 4 mass measurements. So like a whitetail, you have the I guess you can call it like the horn length from base to the tip. So you get 2 of those. One on each side. And then they have a cutter measurement that you measure from the tip of the cutter. You follow the base of it. And then when it touches I guess what you would call like the straight up and down in terms of whitetail, when you get to the base of the main beam, so to speak, or the tine, the base of that tine,
right,
then you go straight across the widest part,
okay,
of that horn.
right,
And so it's it's kind of a 45-degree angled measurement,
right, okay.
Or maybe 30-degree angle, however it's shaped. And then that's it. There is no inside spread credit. There's none of that. There's no tip to tip, type deal.
Right.
So, on day 4, we went back up and we kind of hunted around Broadus. And we actually got on some there on day 4. Just the stalks weren't panning out. And I'm like, man, this is our last day. Let's go back down to that area we saw last night and see if we can get on them. And so we got back down to that area. I actually spotted that same goat with the big cutters, and just he was hanging out on private and just couldn't get a crack at him. He wasn't moving off of that private piece. And there was some others that were moving around on the public, and we tried to get around and make some plays on them, and just didn't pan out.
Right.
So we go back to our campsite, which, speaking of hot water, a buddy of mine lives out there in Broadus, and he had introduced us to a ranch owner out there and said, hey, if you guys want to throw a tent up here, they also have a guest house. It's a trailer that no one lives in, but there's hot running water in there.
Sweet.
So talking about a way to boost your spirits back up, you get a hot shower after you've been sleeping in a tent out there for 3 or 4 days.
For sure.
So now we got our spirits lifted. We just got a hot shower in, and we're laying in our tents, and I kind of yell over to Jesse, and I'm like, hey, what would your thoughts be? I mean, I know we're supposed to wake up in the morning at like 6 and tear down and load up and head back to Iowa. Jesse also, he lives in Iowa, a little west of me. And I said, what if we got up at like 4 and we tore down and we drive back down to that piece of public where we've been seeing all those big goats on? It is kind of on our way back out of town and everything. I mean, I'm layering it on, I'm really trying to sell this idea.
Yeah.
And he just he looks at, or doesn't look at me, but I hear him kind of go, well, I mean, we're already here, so we might as well. Yeah. And I'm like, seriously? Like, you're down with that? He's like, yeah, dude, let's give it one last ditch effort. So, we had a 4-day hunt planned, and now we're in overtime. We wake up at 4:00 in the morning. We're tearing down our tent. We've got frost on our tent poles. So when we went to sleep, we're talking 80, 90 degrees. Mm-hmm. And then we wake up at 4 a.m. and we've got frost on the tent poles. We did the absolute manliest thing we could. We started my truck, turned the defrost on, and we actually got in my truck and got dressed. It was that cold. I mean, it was just freezing cold,
Right.
Not that 40 degrees or whatever, upper 30s is that cold, but when you're accustomed to 195 and 98 temperatures, and then all of a sudden you get like a 60-degree drop, I was like, I am frozen. Like, I can't even feel my hands. So
yeah.
We loaded up and we went back down to that public spot. And the sun came up and spotted that same goat with the big cutters. I mean, he was kind of a homebody, man. He kind of had his little area that he was kind of hanging out in. We sat there and kind of, try to make a game plan. And I told Jesse, I said, all right, 8 a.m., that's our cutoff. If I don't have an arrow in a goat by 8 a.m., that's it. We're heading back to Iowa. And I had 2 arrows left. We devised a plan to do kind of a little ditch dive. What we noticed, and if guys have been out there, girls been out there, those antelope are really, really curious creatures, and they'll sit and watch vehicles drive up and down the road. And I don't know, maybe it's because it's so flat out there. It's like the only source of entertainment or something. I don't know, but they like literally they'll stare and they'll watch at vehicles. So after watching this kind of stuff, over the past few days, I was like, hey, Jesse, here's the plan. You get in the truck, you drive the truck. I'm going to dive off into a ditch, into the ditch line. And, it gives me a couple of feet, but that's all I really need. If you got a couple of feet to get into, and then the sage bush is, tall enough, I can hide behind that. You keep on driving down the road, and he's going to watch you drive down the road. And it'll take his mind off of me, jumping out of the truck. And once he calms back down and he goes back to nibbling on sage and grass and whatnot as he's working his way back towards, that alfalfa, I'll be able to get a shot. And that's how it worked out. Ranged him at 65 yards and was able to get a shot off. My shot was, front of stomach, liver area. Mm-hmm. Up and down was good, but it was a little back.
Right.
And he didn't run off. He just, did the, oh crap,
right.
I've got a hole in me. I'm injured. And he just kind of was walking off, and he started to just bed down and fold up kind of like an accordion. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, this just happened.
It worked.
Yeah, this plan worked. This crazy plan, worked. But then the first thing popped in my head was, well, I said we were here until I got an arrow by 8 a.m. and it's 7:33. So we're good. I don't care how long this takes. Right. And then immediately I'm like, no, I don't want this to take a long time. I've injured this animal. Yes, it's it is a wound that will kill the animal, but I don't know how long it's going to take, and I don't want this animal to suffer.
Right.
So he had bedded down, and I grabbed my last arrow out of my quiver, the last quiver to my name, actually, in the state of Montana. I had no other arrows left. And took the binos to my face and started another stalk on him. He was bedded down facing away, and as he turned his head to the right, I would move to the left, and as he moved his head to the left, I would move to the right, just making sure I stayed exactly, totally behind him, and took my time. And I was able to get into about 20 yards of him and put one last arrow into him. And he was bedded down, facing away from me, so I didn't have a whole lot of vital area. And my best play was just to try to punch the shoulder to hit lungs. Right. That was my best shot available. So that's what I was able to do. And the old G5 broadhead, I was shooting the new G5 dead meats. Nice. And it blew right through the shoulder and stuck in him. He jumped up to his feet and went to run about 5 yards and did that drunken wobble, Right. And that was it. And at that point it was, I was excited, but I was more relieved that I was able to get another arrow in him and end any kind of possible suffering or anything like that. From the first arrow to the second arrow, it was a matter of, 4 minutes, maybe 5 minutes, felt like an hour, but, yeah. So it was like I said, as much as I wanted to jump up and down and be excited because I was thrilled, I was just more relieved, that it was able to work out. And, I had a goat on the ground. We got to work right away, we got to work and field dressed. And, we snapped a couple of photos real fast, but yep. And got him field dressed and got the hide off. I've been told that from some local buddies of mine that live out there, get the hide off as quick as you possibly can. And if you do so, it's some of the best meat that you've ever had in your life,
Yeah, that's what I've heard, man. I was just going to say, I can't wait to hear when you try that. I don't know if you've tried any of it yet or not, but
it's actually thawing out right now, just thawing out enough that we can start cutting, and processing some of it. Cause I just cut everything off in big chunks,
Right.
And just did a quick rump roast and quick quarter and back straps, and so we threw everything in the cooler while we were there, and I caped up to the base of the neck, And after that is where it starts getting really, really tight. And then you got to start making Y cuts and that kind of stuff. And I didn't want the hide to slip. So I went ahead and stopped there, rolled everything up and threw that in the cooler and said, well, you know, when I get home and I got more time, then I'll finish caping out and for taxidermy stuff. But nonetheless, talking about an enjoyable ride home. I mean, what was going to look like a 12-hour, fairly somber, quiet ride home, you know?
Right.
And again, I mean, you know, you and I, we're both diehard hunters.
Right.
We do it for the experience. We do it for the learning that we're going to get out of it. We do it to get away from public for our day jobs and just enjoy what, you know, the creations and enjoy the public lands and all that stuff. That's a given. At the same time, the ride home was much more enjoyable when you're tired, you're beat up, you're hot, you've been sleeping on the ground, you've been living off of meals that come in a pouch that you add hot water to. All that kind of stuff.
Yep.
And I mean, we're beat, you know, like I said, I would have done anything just to lay down and go to sleep. But after knowing that I was coming home with this antelope and coming home with all this meat, man, I was like, I don't care if we got to drive halfway across the country to get home, you know, like I'm good. I don't think I even had an energy drink the whole way home. You know, I was high on life. So that was super cool. And
you basically avoided the drive home that I had. Is what you avoided.
Yes, very much so. And then the bonus of the whole deal, like I said, we were able to shoot some good video and I already had, you know, kind of the script in mind to put together a short film, which an update on that, the short film is complete. Nice. And I will send you a link for the sneak peek of that.
Sweet.
I'm going to submit that to the Badlands Film Festival, and hopefully it'll get picked up there, and I'll get to share that with everybody, you know, in that arena. But I got home, and one of my really good friends, a guy I should introduce you to, a buddy of mine, Jeremy Myers in West Virginia, and he does a lot of work with ScentLock. It's one of his main brands that he does some work with, but really good photographer, great editor. And he calls me and he's like, man, I got to hear all the details. So I'm telling him, you know, kind of telling him the story, and more of a Cliff Notes version than what we just did, but he's like, have you measured him yet? And I said, no, you know, I haven't measured him. I said, dude, you know me, I didn't even measure my Iowa buck from last year. It seems like the more I hunt, the less the score means to me. But nonetheless, he's like, will you measure him for me? And I said, I don't even know where to start measuring, you know? I was like, he's not really wide. He's like, I don't think that's one of the measurements. And I'm like, well, sure it is, you know, because that's a measurement on whitetails.
Right, yeah.
So he sends me a link to the Boone and Crockett measuring thing, and he texts me. He's like, hey, did you get that? I'm like, yeah, I got it. And he's like, well, did you measure him yet? And I'm like, no. He's like, dude, seriously, like, please, just for me, will you measure this thing? And I said, why? He goes, well, you sent me a picture, and I've seen other pictures of other antelopes, and this one looks really big.
Right.
And I said, what are you saying? I mean, he's big, like, in a whitetail world, what does that mean? He's like in the 50s? Is he in the 60s? Or like, what's that mean? He goes, no, like I'm thinking like 70s, 80s. I'm like, shut up, you know? So against my better judgment, I said, all right, screw it. I open up the attachment and I'm like, all right, this isn't going to take very long. This is this is actually a pretty simple measuring system that they have there for these things. I mean, it is kind of a 2-pointer, right? With tickers.
Right.
So, I'm like, this won't take long. So I measure him up, and I measure him once. I write down the score. And then I measure him a second time. I write down the score. And both times I measured, it was within a quarter inch.
Right.
And so I called him, and I said, well, I measured him twice, and here's the lower of the two numbers that I came up with. And he's like, okay, what do you have? And I said, I've got 81 and 5/8. And he's like, you are a jerk. I'm like, why am I a jerk, you know? He's like, dude, congrats. You just killed a Boone and Crockett antelope. And I'm like, shut the front door, you know? I was like, that's just too funny. I didn't even know what I had done. And I'm like, that's super cool. I'm like, is it bad of me to say that I wish it was a big whitetail Boone and Crockett, but
right.
hey, I'll take it. I'll take whatever I can get. My first one, my first antelope ends up being a Boone and Crockett. I'm like, that's.
Yeah, dude. I mean,
I'll take a little charity every once in a while,
That's right, man. Well, there was no charity there, man, and you had to work for that. I remember I had texted you while you were out there just to see how things were going, and you had said, that you had missed one. I knew you were going to be in and out of service and stuff like that, so I wasn't, wasn't trying to blow up your phone. So we texted one day, and you said you had missed one, and I was just thinking, I was like, man, I can't believe you missed. Not that people can't miss, but I was bummed out for you. You know what I mean?
Sure.
You go out there and you get an opportunity. It's like, I'd like to see my buddy bring something home or have a harvest. And then I got another text from you, like not too long, or a couple of days later or whatever, with vindication. And I was, dude, I don't know, like you would have thought I shot the antelope. Like I was pumped. Yeah. Like you sent me the pictures and stuff like that, and I posted one of them on Instagram, and we'll actually probably use the other one of you with the antelope for the cover of this podcast. And I was showing like buddies of mine when I went out west. I was showing buddies of mine. I was like, hey, my buddy John killed this antelope, and my buddy Luke who lives in Montana. And he was like, damn, he's like, man, that's a nice goat. And I was like, yeah. He's like, does he live out here? And I was like, no, he's from Iowa. And he was like, man, that's a nice goat. Like, so, not local guy doing good on the trip.
Yeah. Well, and that was the other part of it too. Like, after I had measured it, I was like, holy crap, this is too crazy, and I will admit, after he told me that 80 inch is the low side for Boone and Crockett, I have since measured him a third time, and I came up with 81 5/8 again. Right. So I'm pretty confident that he'll go Boone and Crockett. I guess there's a drying period time, that I got to wait on. Yeah. But since then, I've talked to several of my Montana buddies, Jordan Gill, Sam Solholt, and my buddy Ben, good horseman, and those guys are like, dude, that was a solid friggin' antelope, So if the local guys are saying that it's solid, then I was like, you know what, maybe this thing is pretty good. But it's amazing though, because like with those antelope, I mean, there's really, as long as it's a mature antelope, they all seem to be right in that area, 76 to 84, right. Okay. Which it doesn't sound like it's a lot, but it's amazing how just a 1 inch here or 1 inch there makes all the difference, when it comes to the score. But like I said, at the end of the day, he could have scored 24 inches and I would have been just as happy with it. Just knowing what goes into that kind of hunting. And it's so different than any strategy that you and I would apply to whitetails, to some degree. I mean, there's some things that are the same, they can smell you a little bit, not like a whitetail, but they can wind you. And, you want to be stealthy and quiet, and you want to draw smooth, and you want to have a good anchor when it comes to the mechanics of archery. But everything else is so different. It's like you can't really, I can't predict those things. I mean, they're a wide open plains animal. Who knows where they're going to go? Sure, they're going to go to water at some point, but right. So it was super fun. I'll point this out. So my buddy Jesse, right after we're done and we've got him loaded into the truck, and he's tagged up and everything. And Jesse goes, man, we ought to do this again next year. And I said, oh yeah. And he's like, we ought to come out here like early September again, just like this. But let's do mule deer, let's do antelope, let's do elk, let's get one of those big combo tags and just come out here for like 2 weeks. And I said, well, I can tell you one thing. If I come out for antelope, it's not going to be early September. He's like, oh, just because it's so hot this week? And I go, no, because it ain't rifle season then. If I come back out to Montana, I'm killing these jokers with a rifle because that's the easiest way to do it. Yeah, dude, I know. Golly. But, go ahead. But now that it's been a couple weeks, I'm already like, yeah, I would definitely go back out there and try that again. It is a lot of fun.
Right. I mean, you hit the nail on the head, man. It's just so, like, hunting out there was so different for me than anything I had ever done. I mean, actually, I wanted to ask you though. So you had mentioned they herd up, so like a buck will have multiple does. If that's even what they call them. I'm so unfamiliar with antelope hunting. It's like I'm not even sure the right wording to use.
Yeah, no, I was the same way. I was like, are they bulls or are they cows? No, we have buck and does, like whitetails.
And but is it similar, I guess, to elk, to where that they have a harem of females as opposed to a whitetail where they just kind of hop on a hot doe and that's his lady friend until the breeding happens and then he's off to the next. So they actually herd up like bull or like elk.
Yeah, no, it's just like that. And again, this is so last year when I was out there, it was definitely during the antelope rut, and you would see one good buck, and he would be standing and facing his all of his does, and some of them were facing him, some of them were bedded down, not facing him, but they would almost all be bedded down in kind of a little circle, maybe a 30-yard by 30-yard area, and there'd be anywhere from 5 to 12. And then he would be off maybe 30 to 40, maybe even 50 yards, standing, facing them. And if you've watched those things enough, I don't know if they're like half asleep, half zoned out. I'm like, what is he staring at? Because it's like they can just stare off into outer space for long periods of time, and you don't know what they're doing. But he's like facing their direction, and you would see whether it be like a satellite bull or juvenile bucks or whatever, they would kind of come sneaking into the area, and then the chase is on. I mean, we're not talking like he would chase them to the point that they ran off. We would watch bucks chase them like a mile.
Wow.
And be just on their ass,
Wow.
chasing them like, get away from and if you would see one of the does start to break loose out of that harem, and then he would sprint off, cut her off, round her back up. Wow. And it's kind of crazy. So the downside to that is look how many, if there's 12 does and one buck, I'm like, geez, man, that's 26 eyeballs, that I got to try to beat. And they can see like 280, 290 degrees. I mean, it's insane. So that was some of the issues that we ran into last year is then you're limited. Then you're trying to find single bucks, or maybe they're juvenile bucks that don't have their own little harem that they've rounded up,
Right.
So this year we got into a little bit of chasing that fourth day. We shot some footage of a good buck chasing a younger buck off, but there wasn't any does around. So I think it was maybe some pre-testosterone, assertiveness going on, but there was some bucks that were kind of following does, but nothing like what it was last year later on in the month, where it was the hardcore rounding them up.
Right.
So yeah, a lot more singles, and it made it a lot easier to get on them,
Yeah. But I mean, it's a happy ending to the trip. I can't say the same for mine. That it was as happy of an ending. I mean, look, the trip was great. For those who maybe haven't heard the podcast where we kind of shared what our trips were going to be. Mine was an elk whitetail mule deer hunt in Montana, and it was a 2-week trip. And we of course drove out, and first
and that's
off,
a drive from PA to Montana. That was a haul.
Yeah, and I'm in Philadelphia, so it's like you're talking about like the east coast of PA. It was like I drove 3/4 of the country essentially. It was around a 36-hour drive for me from where I'm at. So we made the drive. Yeah, exactly. We made the drive out. It took roughly 36 hours, and I was just pumped, to see a lot of that landscape in the country, like to make that drive, just to see things I've not seen before. The first dicey moment we had, like I'm driving. Of course, I pulled the overnight drive shift, so like the whatever it is, like 1 o'clock till 6 o'clock in the morning or something like that, which is like the brutal drive shift whenever you're trading off with buddies. And I get in the back of the truck finally to try to take a nap, and we hit Montana. And for anyone who's driven that that route, like once you hit Montana, and we were hunting on the western side of Montana, so it's like we had to drive across the entire state, which is like a nice 10-hour drive in itself to get across Montana. And we went through an area. After I woke up, and we were seeing all kinds of mule deer along this one road. And it happened to be the Crow Nation reservation that we were driving through. So my cousin's driving, and he's like, yeah, we've taken this route before. He's like, you know what, we should take another route. You know, he's like, let's take a more scenic route or whatever. So we got off the road and got on this, you know, whatever other road we were on. And we're driving, and it turns from asphalt to dirt, you know, and I'm like, all right, so we're driving on this dirt road, and we're just driving and driving and driving. It's just, there's no asphalt in sight. So I'm looking at the gas gauge, and I'm like, do you think we got enough gas? Because our policy was once we hit like the Dakotas, I think, we stopped anytime we saw a gas station if we had just under a half a tank of gas, because they've run into situations before where they had under a half a tank of gas and they weren't going to hit another gas station for who knows how long. And like you run out of gas out there, it's like it could be a ways before you find another gas station, or a while before someone comes by to help you. And you may or may not have cell service to call anybody. So he's like, yeah, we're okay. And he's like, you know, this road shouldn't be that long. I'm like, all right. So we're driving. It's still dirt. We drove, it was like 50 some miles of dirt road. Like we got off the interstate to drive on this road. Now we saw some like just monster mule deer there, because you can't hunt, and only those that live on the reservation can hunt that land. It's illegal for anyone else to, if I'm not mistaken. So we just saw some bruiser mule deer. So I got some mule deer that I got some pictures of, and we're nearly out of gas at this point. We finally found a gas station on the Crow Reservation, and it was one of the weirdest gas stations that I've ever seen. First, like everything has a casino in it out there, which is just different for me to see. And they weren't super stoked about some non-local people being at their gas station, to put it lightly. So we got our gas and moved on our merry way. We got to my buddy lives in southwestern Montana, and he actually has he doesn't live there. He has a cabin there, and he actually lives in the Lincoln area and works for the U.S. Forest Service. And he has a cabin in southwestern Montana. And so we met up there. That was kind of our rendezvous point, and to just kind of finish packing up his truck, because his dad was coming with us, got the wall tents all packed up and stuff like that. And then we were heading to some BLM land. And so we took off. Again, it was like a 4-track, like 4-wheeler path to this BLM land that we're driving on. And once we hit the BLM land, it was an hour and a half roughly drive on basically a 4-wheeler trail into the mountains to get to where we were going to put our campsite for the 2 weeks. So that was like a long haul. One of the trucks overheated on the way. It was just, one thing after another. We finally get there, set up camp, and we're ready to go. Kind of encountering what you had when you first got out there, which was just like ridiculously hot temperatures. I think the first 2 or 3 days we were touching like 90 degrees, which made it hard to kind of dress and get ready to go hunt, because you would leave in the mornings and you were in the 40s, so it was chilly out. And then by mid-afternoon you were hitting close to 90 degrees. And then whenever you were coming out after dark, when the sun went down, you were back dipping into like the 50s again before you got, back to camp or whatever. So of course it was kind of difficult to dress for us, but at any rate, we get camp set up, we're ready to roll, and get up the first morning all stoked. We go to the glassing point, we start glassing. Well, actually the first night when we got there, my buddy Luke and I went out. We had a razor just to kind of get around the BLM land more quickly. So we went to this place to glass, and we saw one bull in this meadow, and then we actually saw a cow that was pretty close. So it's like we had sightings like the first night that we were there just to kind of go glass. We get up the next morning, we hit our glassing point, and I want to say that morning we saw 5 bulls that morning in different meadows that were all like within reach of being huntable. You know what I mean? So we were all pretty stoked. Like that morning we were like, awesome. Like we've got bugling bulls, like they were bugling a little bit in the morning.
Yeah. Off to a good start. This is a good sign, This
is a great sign. Like it's right where we wanted to be. We were at the right spot. It looked like, they weren't cranking yet, but like we were hearing some bugling. So it was like, all right, they're being vocal at least. We saw, that morning it was a 6x6 that we saw and a 5x5 in this one meadow. And then we saw a couple of those, but those were the 2 of the nicer ones that we had seen. So my buddy and I, he's like, let's go down. He's like, I've been down in this area before. He's like, let's head down here. and see if we can't cut them off. He's like, I think I know where they're bedding. And I was like, all right. And we'll see if we can't, set up a call sequence and try to get them to come in. So we hiked down into this area, which was, I don't even know how many miles we did that day. But it's just all, everything there is uphill and downhill where we were at. There was never a piece of flat ground, a bunch of blowdown and just, scree rock slides and just, nasty hiking conditions pretty much. And we're bugling and doing some cow calling and stuff like that when we set up to do some sequences, and just weren't getting any response, like, at all. It was like once they left that meadow and got into the dark timber, it's like they just shut off. Like there was nothing. So we kept kind of, still hunting along as we were going, and we would stop and we would call, and we would stop and we would call. And then finally, like, we kind of hiked our way to where he thought they were bedding, and sure enough, we found both the bulls where they were bedding. Unfortunately, we bumped them, which was the unfortunate thing there. But what it told us was they were in that area. So we were on like where they were going to be, the area they were going to be using. And there were 2 wallows that weren't far from there. So the plan really was for me for like the next 2 days is I was going to hunt that wallow since the temperatures were going to be really, really high. Because thinking they were going to have to come to water. And it just never kind of panned out that, seeing a bull on that wallow. Not that they weren't using it. I'm assuming that we were just missing one another. So I think it was the 3rd day. We still had pretty nasty temperatures. I guess it was the 3rd day before. Well, I hunted that wallow the 3rd and the 4th day, I think. So the 2nd day, I think we moved on from that spot to let it rest. And we put on this huge hike along this ridge that was just ridiculously long, completely side hilling the whole way. The peak of it was like 9,000 feet. And we had bulls bugling below us, and we just couldn't get them to move. Like they just weren't moving off of wherever they were at. They would respond, but they weren't making any headway in terms of coming toward us. So we spent that entire afternoon hiking out this whole mountainside. And I think this day we did about 10 miles this day. So once we got out to this final meadow, we both kind of looked at each other and we did one last calling sequence, and the bulls just weren't now responding at all. And so, we just kind of looked at each other, and he's like, I was like, do you want to walk back through this timber to get back to camp? I was like, or do you just want to like make the nasty pool up over this summit and just hike the spine out? Cause at least then it'll be flatter and we can hike the spine out to get back to where we need to go. He's like, let's just make the nasty pool up to the top. He's like, and then we'll hike the spine out. So that's what we plan to do. Dude, there were so many false summits on the way up this thing. Like every time I thought we were getting to the top, it was just like a peak before you could see the next peak. Like, and it was just like, and there were like 4 of those. And at the end, it was like we were at 9,000 feet and some change on this scree rock slide. We crest over it, and I'm huffing and puffing because we just, hoofed this whole thing. And I just happened to look up, and there's a huge mule deer standing 40 yards in front of me. And I'm like, you got to be kidding me. I was like, there's a mule deer right there. I have my bow.
You're
of
like,
course.
I have a tag for that. I have a tag for that.
I was so tired. It was one of those things where it was like, it took me a second to like for my brain to like register what I needed to do next. So I ranged him real quick. We didn't like spook. I mean, he saw us, right? So he started just kind of like walking away, and I ranged him at first, and he was 40 yards, and he moved again, and then he was at like 50 yards, and it's like I was comfortable out to 60, and he pretty quickly got to 60 and beyond. So, we decided it was like we'll let him kind of walk until he's just far enough away, because there was basically a saddle between this summit and the next summit over on the spine. And so, we both kind of looked at each other, and I was like, he's probably going to kind of dip down on that saddle. And I was like, we both agreed if we back out after he turns his back, we can probably run around that point, get over to that saddle, which is exactly what we did. Get over there, take my shoes off, and then try to put on a stalk to get down over the point to see if I can get a shot at him. And I did that, and just kind of like you were talking with that antelope, it's like, I don't know what happened, man, but he was like Kaiser Soze. He just like vanished like a fart in the wind, was gone. Like, yeah. I don't know where he went, like nothing. Like he should have been right where I, stalked into. So I put my boots back on, and, my buddy had my camera, and it was one of those ones where we were actually going to get it on film if it happened. And, So we decided, it was like, all right, well, this isn't happening. Let's just go ahead and hike back out. So we put my boots on and we start hiking back out. And then don't you know, like we hike maybe like 100 yards and he's standing 40 yards in front of us again. Like, and I'm like, there he is. And he's like,
yeah.
And I range him and he's at like 40 yards and he's at 50 yards. And I went to full draw on him and I'm standing there and I'm thinking, I'm just like, and I was just losing so much daylight. At this point, it was like, I just didn't think that I could make an ethical shot at that point with the type of light that I had. So I drew down, and it was just one of those things where if I had probably another 40 minutes of daylight, we probably would have been able to get an arrow in him, at least a shot at him. But just ran out of daylight. So we ended up coming back to camp, and that was kind of like the highlight of that day. And then the next 2 days, I actually ended up hunting that wallow. Didn't see anything on that, but the last day that I was in there, my buddy, we had walkie-talkies. That way, if we were happy, because we basically hunted in groups of 2 the entire time we were there. And that way, if when you were in a group of 2, if you wanted to split up from one another and you were going to hunt, different drainages and you were going to kind of still hunt because they just weren't bugling the entire time that we were out there, that we just weren't getting a lot of response. So we were basically having to hunt them straight up, like you were saying, like Cherokee style. Like, you know what I mean? It was, or Crow style, maybe like in that region. But we were having to do just straight up spot and stalk and still hunt, walk 10 yards, stop and look and stand there for a couple minutes. That was basically like the entire type of hunting that we were having to do. And basically trying to find their bedding areas and trying to stalk in on them while they were bedding during the course of the day. That was really our option if they weren't bugling in the morning or the evening. So we had walkie-talkies, and they got to a point to where they could actually radio me and said, "Hey, I got in there in the morning. They're like, hey, lunchtime, why don't you come on out? We're gonna pull camp and get out of here." So essentially, these guys have hunted this area for like the past 5 or 6 years, and they've seen not much hunting pressure there at all. And this year, they saw more hunting pressure than they've ever seen. Like, there's been more guys there. We've seen more trucks and more ATVs and stuff like that. So I got out of there and weather was getting ready to come in too. And I don't know, how familiar you are. It's like, I saw a little bit of it, but like the dirt that's there, the soil that's there is so fine, because where we were at was the southwestern portion of Montana. It's, I guess, technically considered the high desert. The dirt there is so fine that it's almost just like dust. So any amount of water that you get on it just turns it into like a gumbo that just sticks to everything. And there is no traction whatsoever in it. Like, it's just, there's not like there's rocks in it to where it actually, it's mud, but like you can get traction. It's just like grease. And it's like really slimy. Yeah, it's just nasty. So, my buddies were like, we're not getting any. There's not a lot of bugling going on, and we think it's because there's a lot of guys in this area. Like, we're seeing more guys than we've seen in a long time. Our bull sightings in the mornings when we would do glassing just completely dried up. Like, we weren't even seeing bulls and not getting hardly any bugling. So they were like, we're going to pull camp and we're going to get out of here. And, Luke lives right there around the Dillon area, is where his cabin's at. And so basically he's like, we'll just go back there. And he has a woodshed, a log woodshed that he has set up with like a wood stove and stuff. And he was like, you guys can just throw your cots in there and use that as base camp. He's like, and we'll hunt from the cabin. Now the bummer was that, we got into some better hunting areas, but now instead of like a 15-minute hike or a quick side-by-side ride to the drainage you want to hunt for the day, it was now like an hour to an hour and a half drive to get to whatever mountain range you wanted to hunt for a day. And then however many of miles you had to hike in at that point. So some of the areas that we looked at were really just walk-in only areas, because we thought that would keep guys away from wanting to hunt it, just because it was a little tougher to get in. You couldn't drive in or anything and use ATVs, so we hunted a lot of those areas. So the rain came in the one day, and it just poured rain. That day I had my best bull sighting. We hiked to the top of this mountain. It was 9,000 feet. And the morning was actually pretty nice. And then we got to the other backside of this mountain, and we could smell the elk in the one area, but we just couldn't see them, which was odd, because anytime we smelled them, we would usually see them. We got to the top of this mountain, down the backside of it, took a little break for lunch, and then decided to split up into pairs again. And I was hunting with my buddy Matt this time, and we got to these 2 drainages, and we both were just kind of like, if we're going to hunt these drainages down, it doesn't make sense for us to hunt together. Let's just split up. We'll each take a drainage, and we'll meet at the bottom at the end of the day. And then there was like this small little like cattle road that you could see from the point. We were like, let's just make that our rendezvous point, before dark, and we'll figure out a way to hike out of here. So I was like, all right. So he's like, which way do you want to go? I was like, I'll go left. I just picked left arbitrarily. He's like, all right, I'll go right. So we head off. We split up. It wasn't 5 minutes, and I'm walking. So sometimes when you still hunt and you're looking down these drainages, if they're really narrow drainages, you don't want to get sucked to the bottom of these drainages. One, you're going to make a lot of noise. Two, just like whitetail, like they're probably going to bed 3/4 of the way or part of the way up the side of the drainage, up the side of the ridge. So you don't want to get below them. You want to try to stay above them.
Sure.
So I was walking a meadow's edge. And when I say a meadow's edge, it wasn't really a meadow, just grass on a steep grade going down the side of a mountain. And the drainage was narrow enough that I could see both sides of it. So I was just kind of walking along that, and I would, walk 10 yards and I would stop and I would just kind of scan and look. And I walked and I was scanning, and it was maybe 5 minutes, and I looked to my right, and there was a really nice 6x6 that was just standing there looking at me. And we both happened to see each other at the same time. I had enough time to range him, and he was at 60 yards, and he blew out, and that was it. Which was kind of a bummer, because it was one of those things where, kind of like what you were saying earlier, where it was like, I was like, is that going to be the only opportunity that I'm going to have, like to have an elk in range this entire trip? And I just completely blew it. It's like I didn't even get it,
Right.
I mean, there wasn't really anything I could do about it. It was just the conditions that we were hunting in. It wasn't like I could call to him or anything like that, because we had been calling as we were hiking into that spot, and we were getting no response whatsoever from anything. So there wasn't like I could do a whole lot about it. The only thing that would have helped me is if I just would have seen him 10 seconds earlier, I would have had an opportunity, but that's, just wishful thinking. So we get to the bottom, and it's one of those things where it's like the hunting's been pretty tough. I get to the bottom of that drainage, and I'm waiting to meet up with the rest of the guys, and it just starts pissing rain. Like, aside from seeing that really nice bull, the best thing that came out of that day was that my Sitka rain gear worked to perfection, and I stayed dry. That was the best thing that happened, like, on that day, basically. Was that I stayed dry. Like, and I can absolutely vouch, like, I've never had rain gear that actually worked, and that rain gear works. So
nice.
I hiked to this tree that we said we were going to meet at, and we're like, all right, let's get out of here. So after all that, my feet were wet, of course. It was a 4-mile hike out still, like, to get back to like where we parked the truck. So we hike out. The next day, it was supposed to snow like crazy. We got up the next morning, and it was just like, it was basically a whiteout. Like, there was no way to go really do much of anything. It was supposed to ease up in the afternoon, so we waited until the afternoon until the snow eased up a little bit. We tried to get into some areas to hunt, but just some of those access roads to get in. I mean, you live in a super rural area. It's basically like a 4-wheeler path that you're trying to get through that nobody plows or anything like that. So it's, and some of those roads have sheer cliffs on both sides, and it's like if you lose traction, it's like you're just kind of out of gas. You just hope there's a tree close to the top of that drop off to stop you. Yeah, exactly. So we made it partway up this one mountain, and we all just kind of looked at each other, and it was getting kind of dicey. And we were like, well, we can get out and throw the chains on and try to make the rest of the way up this mountain, but there's no guarantee that when we get up there number one, that we'll be able to get up there and end up having to back down. And none of us liked the proposition of that. So that day it was a wash. The next day we went back to where I saw that nice 6x6, because that same day that I saw that 6x6, my buddy Matt saw 7 bulls on his hike through that drainage. So there were bulls in there. They just weren't bugling, because I think he saw 7 bulls. I saw one earlier. So I saw two that day. And then my cousin and our buddy Luke, they saw, for public land, saw a really nice bull. They ended up finding a wallow, and they just happened to sit down there to take a rest or take a break hiking, and find a place to take a break, because it's a attractive place to kind of sit down. And a bull actually happened to walk by. He just never got a shot at him. But he was a bull that was over 300 inches and just never got a shot, which is a great public land bull. So we were like, you know what? We know there's bulls in there. Let's go back. That's, and there's nobody there. Like, we saw no human sign. It was a 4-mile hike in just to get to where you would want to hunt, to where the drainages started, So we made the 4-mile hike in, like, bitter cold that morning, foot of snow. That day I ended up doing 15 miles in knee-deep snow at 9,000 feet of elevation. That was, like, you want to talk about, knock your stuff in the dirt that day?
Yeah.
I had nothing left, man. We got to this mountaintop, and I dug a hole in the snow to get out of the wind. I laid my rain gear on the snow and put my pack behind my head, and I passed out for 2 hours. Out cold, took a nap.
Yeah.
I'm thinking that day, actually, my cousin had a shot at a bull at 18 yards and still couldn't get a shot because all he could see ass and antlers was all he could see. And the bull had no clue he was there. And at one point, for whatever reason, animals always seem to have this sixth sense. The bull looked over his shoulder at him. And usually when an animal goes to look at you, if you're behind them, they'll turn and give you a shoulder.
Sure.
Never gave him a shoulder, and he blew out of there and was gone. So, in all, the hunting was pretty tough those couple of days. We ended up moving to a different mountain range altogether, which was, the hike wasn't quite as far in, but the pool was pretty nasty up over the top. Again, it was, right around 9,000 feet, 9,200 feet or something like that. But down the back side of it was some really good dark timber. So we ended up getting in there and splitting up. My cousin and our buddy went one way, and then me and my other buddy went the other way. And, once we got down in there, we started calling, and immediately we had bulls respond. And so we were like, all right, this is good. This is the best response we had the entire trip that we were out there. And so we had 3 bulls that were working. One was just to the left of us and below. One was directly below us, and one was to the right and below us. And so we just kind of stood there. We bugled back a few times, did some cow calling just to see who was going to respond. It sounded like the one to the left and below us was the herd bull, and he wasn't making a move. Like, he wasn't coming. It sounded like the one in the center was just moving away from us, but the one to the right, it sounded like he wanted to play a little, like he was willing to play ball. So we started walking or stalking toward him, calling, and then he ended up moving away from us. And so we just kind of paused and kept calling, and he would respond, and then his responses kind of slowed down a little bit. And then we walked a little closer toward him and then let out a bugle just to see if we could get something to kick up again. And he responded right away. And now it sounded we were about the same distance away that we originally were. Like, we closed the distance and he didn't really move away. So he was probably about 100 yards away. And so at that point, we were like, you know what? The hunting's just been really tough. We're just going to be aggressive. Like, we're just going to have to go after it. So our plan is basically, I'm going to call, cow call or bugle or whatever the case is. He's like, whenever he bugles and responds back, we're basically going to run like 20 yards, like run as far as you can run until he stops bugling. Cause when he bugles, he's not gonna be able to hear you. He's not gonna be able to hear you. So that's basically what we did until we started closing the distance. And then really what it was like, we basically cracked his safety zone. And once we cracked his safety zone, he started coming toward us. Like, he just needed to get to what I think it is. And I'm not an expert in hunting elk. I think he of course was a satellite bull, but I think that he didn't want to come in on a herd bull's cow thinking he was going to get his ass kicked. But if the cow was willing to come to him and not and move away from the herd bull, then he felt a little bit safer about not, getting into a fight with someone who was going to whoop him. You know what I mean? So
makes sense.
Right, exactly. It's like, duh, right?
Yeah.
So we got, we closed the distance to probably, maybe 60 yards. And my buddy, lets out a call again, and he responds, and like, you can hear he's coming now. Like, he's closing the distance. And so my buddy was trying to get me in a position to take a shot because he was the one who was calling. So he leans over and grabs me. He's like, hey, I'm going to move you over to here. I'm going to move back 100 yards and call. And I just, grabbed his shoulder and stopped. And I was like, he's standing right there. Like, I could see him. Like, he was 40 yards away. Like, I could see a rack. I could see his whole body. And so we couldn't move at that point. And so he kept walking closer and closer and closer. He got to about 30 yards and just ripped out a bugle and just screamed at us. Just, you're just like, I mean, that was probably the coolest thing of the trip, was to watch that animal just like, I mean, it just, you hear stories of like, whenever you, like, I guess seeing it on TV or hearing it on TV just doesn't do it justice. When you're standing there right in front of them, they do that. It's just like, it's a sound that just like goes completely through you. Like, you can feel it. You can feel it in your chest. You know what I mean? Like, just like the tone and just like the gravitas of like their bugle. And so he's standing at 30 yards and just like rips out a bugle, and he's stepping closer to us. Now, I couldn't move to get a shot, so My buddy was standing to the left of me. I was directly to the right. I mean, we were literally standing a foot apart from one another. There was a shooting lane to the left, and there's one right in front of me too. So it just happened to be whatever way he made a move, whoever had the clear shooting lane first was going to take a shot. And that's what we agreed to when we went on the trip, was there was going to be 4 of us all hunting together at different times. You know, we all share the meat, you know what I mean? So, and we all help each other pack out. And so we don't, whoever has the shot, take it. Don't pass it up so someone else gets the shot opportunity.
Sure.
You know, don't look a gift horse in the mouth, essentially. So we're standing there, and he walks in, and he's at 26 yards now. And now he looks right at me. You know, my buddy's already at full draw, and I'm trying to get drawn. And I'm like this is the worst, because I drew my bow back halfway and couldn't finish the draw cycle. So I'm holding my bow like all 65 pounds at half draw, like just standing there waiting for him to like move his head so I can finish my draw cycle. He moves his head and looks like to his left, kind of behind him, away from us. I finish my draw cycle. I pull back. I'm just waiting. And then he passed my buddy's shooting lane. He released, hit him. I saw the arrow hit him, like, you know, hit him. It was a good shot, of course. And it was weird. I was expecting like a whitetail reaction, like a big kick, you know, like when you really hit the money shot with a whitetail, it's like you get that big kick. And he didn't do anything but like just kind of jerk and and like turn to his left, like away, and broke the arrow off. But you could see that he had in, you know, like a good, man, I don't know, probably like 16, 18 inches of arrow that was in there and was stuck in him. And he didn't run away. Like I was expecting him to run. Like he just turned, he jumped, turned, and then just started walking away really slow. And we both looked at each other at the same time. And I just said, I was like, that's a dead elk. I was like, he's hurt. You know, started walking away, and he looked at me, and he's sick. He gets back about 40 yards, and you just see his back legs give out, hit the ground. We waited for about a half hour, walked up, found good blood. He walked. So in total, when he dropped, he was 40 yards from us. He was shot at 26 yards. He made it maybe 20 yards before he piled up and then slid down this side of the mountain. Once we caped him out and, you know, started quartering him out and stuff like that, we pulled the heart out, and my buddy shot him straight through the heart. I mean, if anyone follows the Truth From Stand Instagram page, there's a picture on there, but he made a perfect heart shot where that dude was dead on his feet after the shot. Yeah. Just didn't know it.
That's nuts.
I would like to say that's where the adventure ended. So that was on a Sunday, and my buddy, you know, he's a little nuts. You know, we're getting ready to pack in on Sunday. Like I pack stuff in because I'm not used to that terrain. So it's like, I take stuff in to like plan to stay the night if I have to. You know what I mean? Because I'm like, well, if something happens and I got to stay the night, it's like, I want to make sure I got food, something to make a fire, like all that stuff. So we're getting ready to leave the truck before we do that hunt. And he's like, Campbell, it's no pack Sunday. I'm like, what? He's like, no pack Sunday. He's like, we're going in light, we're going in lethal. And I'm like, what are you talking about? He's like, if we don't take anything to take care of something after it's killed, he's like, we'll kill something tonight. And I'm like, dude, you can go with your no pack Sunday all you want. I was like, I'm taking a pack with like an extra jacket and something to drink. You know what I mean? I was like, I'm like, whatever. So sure enough, we get in there and he shoots it. So we only have one pack. He doesn't have a knife. He doesn't have anything. Right. So good thing I had my pack, because I at least had a knife and stuff like that. We start, you know, he was shot at 6:30. You know, and we didn't walk up on him till just about 7, you know, and we're in the timber and it gets dark out there right around, I think you could probably have shooting light to maybe 8:15. If you're on a meadow, if you're in the timber, your shooting light's probably gone by like quarter to 8 probably. So we get down and we start caping him out, and, you know, or you start quartering him up and stuff. And I'm like, you don't have a pack, how are we getting this thing out of here? He's like, well, give me your pack. I'll carry the heavier quarter. So that night we took out a hind quarter and a front shoulder, which I made a drag rope and drug it and partially carried it on my shoulder out. So it was a partial drag and partial carry. So of course he doesn't have a light either. So now it's pitch black dark, and I'm like, all right, I got a headlamp. So let me get my headlamp out, put my headlamp on. It's a 2-mile walk back. So we have to scale the other back side of this mountain to get up on the point of the mountain to walk back down the other side in the snow. Because remember, it snowed a foot, you know, 2 days prior to this. We get about 20 yards and my batteries in my headlamp died.
Oh no.
Yeah. So we are in the timber on the side of a mountain with the fresh kill, one pack, and no light to walk out in the pitch black dark for 2 miles.
Oh my gosh, dude.
Yeah. Which was it was. I mean, we made it. Of course, I'm here, so we made it. But it was not a pleasant pack out. But spirits were high when we got to the truck because it was finally someone put something on the ground, which was good. The next day, we ended up all going back to that area and hunted our way back to the kill site, and that was actually probably the best day, man. Like the best, I guess, the memory that I'll take from that trip, that was the coolest time, was the four of us all going back to where we made the shot, and all of us chipping in to help, quarter that animal out, quarter him up and pack him out. And we made a bonfire and stuff like that because it was really cold that morning. We made a little fire. That way we'd have somewhere to keep warm. And we took some backstrap off the elk immediately and put it on some sticks and cooked fresh elk meat, over an open fire for lunch. So we'd have something to eat for lunch and stuff like that. And none of us were really concerned with hunting much that day. We were really just more concerned with just, we all just kind of looked at each other and was like, so many times, like you make a harvest and then it's just like a rush to get it out of the woods because either it's the temperature or you don't have the next day to do anything, to hunt or whatever. But this was an opportunity that we had to just kind of enjoy each other's company and all kind of just take in the experience and just be with each other in this awesome place. And so that's exactly what we did. We spent the day there just kind of hanging out. We made like little places for ourselves to sit, and we just hung out and talked and butchered the elk up and ate fresh elk meat and shared stories and laughed and just had a good time, man. And that was probably the best part of the trip was that day, because that was just that's something I'll remember for a long time, was just the shot, the kill, the pack out in the dark, hanging out around that campfire the following day, making all the butchering requirements take place and do all that. So that was really the trip, man. I mean, we hunted for a couple of days after that. But we had a couple mule deer encounters, that we went the full draw on, but just couldn't seal the deal. And then it was a long 36-hour drive home. So different than yours, where you were all jazzed up and could have drove, 3/4 of the country. I did drive 3/4 of the country, and it was a quiet drive.
Right.
But I wouldn't trade it for anything, man. It's like we're already planning to go back next year and make a hunt. My one buddy, I think he's actually going to go back out in November for a gun hunt. I mean, if we were hunting rifle out there, we would have killed bulls all of us would have killed bulls probably in the first 3 days. Because we did see a couple the first day, and then we would have had some mule deer, on the ground too. So we definitely had close enough encounters for that. My cousin missed a mule deer at about 60 yards. But yeah, man, that was the trip. And now I'm back here getting after whitetails, trying to see if my whitetail season doesn't turn out any better than my elk hunt. So fingers crossed for that.
That's pretty cool, man. And that's a long time to be out there. That's, I know we both kind of talked about it before we left and talked about the importance, I guess maybe the mindset of hunting in the East and the West can be a little different. You have to me, Western hunting, sure, you got to be on your A game, and you got to be proficient, and you got to be good, and you got to be skilled outdoorsman and hunter. And, but your temperament or the mood or whatever is so much more important when you're out there camping, and especially if you're with hunting buddies, you're with those guys like 18, 20 hours a day. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
If everybody's head's not in the right place, talking about getting sick of somebody real quick, Yeah.
I mean, that's the good thing too, man. It's like the group of guys that I go with are just top-notch dudes. It's a lot of laughs, a lot of fun. We're all pretty serious hunters, you know what I mean? So there's some moments where, we take things kind of seriously. There's definitely some, cursing and anger that occurs, during the course of a hunt, just with how certain things unfold and stuff like that. But by and large, it's like, everyone, I mean, we enjoyed each other's company and stuff like that. So there wasn't a guy in camp that I wouldn't go spend 2 weeks in a tent with, put it that way. And you're definitely right, man. The mindset has to be, it's just, it's just different. It's one of those things where, I mean, there's a mindset you have to grind out like a long whitetail season whenever you're doing, say you're going to go do, say you're a guy like me and you have vacation time you're going to take to go hunt and you're going to go do, hunt in Ohio, like I like to do. And it's like, I've got 8 days to try to make it happen. It's like, I'm going to grind out 8 to 10 days of all day sits. You know what I mean? And like, some days are good, some days aren't good. You might only, depending on where you're at, you might only see a handful of bucks. You might not see a shooter at all, but you're going to grind out, 8, 12-hour days or more in a stand, like that's one type of hunting that's tough. When you get out, like in that Western style hunting, it's like, it's the grind of like, it's so hard because you see animals, right? You see them. Like I would say that I see more animals than I do when I like Western hunting than I do whitetail hunting. But there's so much more involved to try to get close enough to get a shot. You know what I mean? Because there's always an opportunity because you can move in closer. Whereas whitetail, it's kind of hard. Like it's like they're either going to come, you either set your right stand location or you didn't. You know what I mean? For that particular area. Out west, it's like you have to have the mental toughness to say, I'm going to make that stock. Because there are some days like after you've hiked 10 miles and now you spot a bull on the next mountain, it's like, do you want to make that 5-mile hike to maybe have an encounter and possibly get a shot? You know what I mean? And it's just, and it weighs on you. You know what I mean? Because part of it is like, you have to be honest with yourself. It's like, can I get over there? Physically, am I going to be able to get it done? You know what I mean? Can I get over there in time? Number one. Two, once I get over there, am I going to have enough, oomph to actually like have my wits about me to make the shot? And then three, it's like, if I do, make the shot, do I got enough gas in the tank to make the hike out and make the pack out and then possibly have to come back and pack out the second half that same night and have an all night pack out? Right. It's like, that's the cost to play that game out there. You know what I mean?
And as, whitetail seasons have opened up and, I've sat one time in Iowa so far. It was just a very, very, non-invasive sit. A place I could get into and I could watch a huge big alfalfa field and glass stuff. That was more the reason for it. But I have hunted several times down in Missouri this season, and I would be lying if I didn't say that there's been some of my sits where I'm like, I feel like I should climb down and see if I can put a stalk on that whitetail over there. I'm sitting in a tree stand and like just what you were saying, I'm kind of married to this tree stand set right now. And the deer are on that side of the food plot. I don't know if they're going to come this way. And if they don't come this way, there's really not a lot I can do about it. So it is kind of different. I've actually had a few of those thoughts already this year where I do think that it's going to change a little bit of my style of hunting. I do see myself maybe getting a little more aggressive this year with some of my run and gun sets. I'll probably do more than I've done in the past.
Right.
I'll probably hang and hunt a lot more than I have before.
Right. Well, speaking of whitetail and getting aggressive, how's I know we talked a little bit about off air before we hopped on to record how your set went tonight, but how's everything kind of shaken out for you? I know you've hunted in Missouri a little bit. I know we texted back and forth a little bit whenever you were in the tree in Missouri, and of course we caught up a little bit today about your hunt today. But how are things panning out?
Last year was my first year in Iowa, and opening day, the second day, the third day of the season, I was in a tree. And I wasn't getting real aggressive. I was hunting some field edges and stuff, but still, nonetheless, I came running in, charging in. This year, my strategy was stay out of the woods a lot of September, keep the camera soaking, start to transition the cameras over to some scrapes, mock scrapes, field edges, things like that. But I have sat some in Missouri. I have access to a property in Missouri for the first 30 days of the season. And it's supposed to be kind of an exclusive thing. No one's supposed to be in there. And I had some pretty decent mid 40s. One was kind of an upper 40s deer. that I had patterned pretty good through August and early September. And then I started getting pictures of another hunter that was hanging all of his ladder stands that he rifle hunts it later on in the year. And I haven't gotten any pictures of any mature deer since then. So that's kind of a bummer.
Yeah.
But knowing that I've already purchased a $225 non-resident tag, and I'm kind of vested. I helped the landowner out with his providing some soybeans and stuff like that this year. So I'm kind of vested in this property. I thought, well, I'm going to go sit and, see what I see. I've been seeing a lot of does. It's been pretty warm for the first part of the season here that it opened, and like it's been a lot over the Midwest and even in PA and stuff. So It's been pretty warm. Wasn't getting a lot of deer activity, getting some does and some little 1 and 2 year old bucks that were coming out right at last light, that last 30, 45 minutes, kind of typical stuff for this time of year. But the pressure was rising all day today. We've got a couple of days of thunderstorms that are going to roll through Iowa starting tonight. So I said, you know what, I'm going to go back out there and sit and, see if some bucks get up on their feet and move around into this clover plot. So I sat on a clover plot tonight, and nothing, man. Absolutely nothing. I'm looking at my watch, and I'm like, we've got maybe 5-10 minutes of shooting light, and that's it. I'm about to get skunked. And as soon as I looked up, I see one little spike buck come bounding into the clover plot, and then he looks over his shoulder, and of course, you get excited because I'm like, well, who's next, and next onto the stage is, and I'm like, oh my gosh, a good solid mid-50s 4-year-old, just a clean 10, really, really good mass, great deer. He comes stepping out into this clover plot. I range him immediately. He's at 75 yards. He walks a little closer. He gets to 70. And there's a scrape that's exactly 50 yards from me, and I noticed it on my walk in. It was fresh. Mm-hmm. So we had a little bit of rain this morning. So my first thought was those bucks. One of those bucks is going to go over there and fresh and hit that scrape again after this rain that we had this morning. In theory,
right.
And they start. They all kind of start. There was actually 2 other little bucks. 20s. One might have been a 30s buck, but 2/3-year-olds, probably 2-year-olds. Mm-hmm. And they start working their way towards that scrape as well. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is going to happen. This is going to happen. I've still got 5 minutes of shooting light left, and I only need him. I need him to walk another 10 yards, and I'm good. And he'll be in that 50 to 60 yard range, and I'll feel comfortable, taking that shot. I start to hear some geese way, way off in the distance. And there's a wetland area that is in front of me. So I know that's where they're going. They continue to fly overhead, and right when they get directly over top of those bucks, 15, 20 geese all let out their honking. And I'm sure there's some listeners that are waterfowl guys.
Right.
I'm not a waterfowl guy. Those geese, the honking is like an annoying sound to me.
Right.
They're as bad as like a sandhill crane.
Right.
It's just, I don't know, it's annoying to me, but especially after tonight.
Right.
So they go off, they're just honking like crazy directly over top of these bucks, and all 4 bucks, they do they squat down, like somebody just shot at them kind of thing, and they all kind of squat down, and they immediately kind of look left, look right, and they just bolt off into the timber. And I'm like, no, what just happened? No, seriously, that really just didn't just happen.
Dude, busted like geese.
I know. And like I said, it's just the weirdest thing ever. But once they heard the honking, man, it freaked them out. I have no idea what the deal was. I don't know that I've ever had that happen before, or if anybody else listening's ever had that happen before, but that's the only thing I can figure. Like I said, as soon as they honked, they were directly over top of them, and they all 4 just squatted down like there was a gunshot,
Wow. Now, is this on your piece?
No, this was down in Missouri.
Oh, okay. This is down in Missouri. All right.
Yep, down in Missouri, and the clock's ticking. I've got access to that property. I've got 11 more days, and man, I don't really want another dramatic hunt, to come down to the last day with my last arrow.
Right.
That's not what I'm looking for.
Right.
But
you'd like to
I'll
wrap
continue
this
to
up
hunt that.
Right. You'd like to wrap this up a little quicker if you can.
Yes, yeah. But it was very cool to see that there was, like I said, to see a good solid mid-50s buck down there, good mature deer. Remember, I'm still a Kentucky guy.
Right.
I can't. I'm not an Iowa native. I live in Iowa, but I'm not like a native. So I haven't grown up with big deer. But I can tell you, a mid-50s deer on a 10-point frame, 4-year-old, yeah, that gets me excited.
Yeah,
it got me fired up, man. And I got to reach for my bow for the first time of the whitetail season, put it that way. And so that was exciting enough to get to go through the motions like that. And you know what? It's another reminder, because my heart was beating a million miles an hour. And so that's what I live for, man. I'm like, I hope that feeling never, ever, ever goes away.
Dude, you hit the nail on the head there, man. Because like, as much as I enjoyed that hunt out west, like it's one of those things where I didn't have any frame of reference or expectation of what was going to happen. So even when we were seeing elk and I went to full draw, like I don't even really recall what happened. You know what I mean? To be quite honest, like I don't remember like this moment of like crazy excitement, other than just like after it was done, I was like, oh, that was awesome. You know what I mean? Like I was excited then.
Sure.
My whitetail season thus far, it's like, kind of similar to you. It's like when I got back from Montana, the weather was super hot when I got home. It was like the eastern part of the state of PA, I think, as we mentioned on one of the last podcasts, it's, it opens earlier than the rest of the state, and then the rest of the state opens at usually like the last Saturday of September or the first Saturday of October, depending on how those Saturdays fall. And so I had an opportunity to go hunt right after I got back from Montana, but it was just, the weather was just miserable, and I wasn't going to go out and sit. And of course I had a honey-do list to kind of take care of when I got back and stuff too, which would probably be a better option for me for my hunting future for the rest of the season.
Sure.
So my opportunity to get out was really opening weekend. And, fortunately here in PA, the weather kind of turned around and we actually had a cold front coming through that weekend. And I'm, with being a working guy and whatnot, it's, I don't often get to hunt those good cold fronts or the backsides of those good cold fronts, because a lot of times they're not falling on weekends. It seems like they'll fall in the middle of the week or whatever the case is. And I don't really get to reap the benefit of it a lot of times. So I was really excited about that opening day just because, two reasons really. One was, I was going to get to hunt the backside of the cold front, which meant I was probably going to get a nice high pressure bluebird day, which is good. And then the other piece of it was that a lot of the guys that like the archery hunt, our farm, or that do hunt our farm with us during archery season, were going to be out of town. So I was going to kind of have, nobody there. And there really hasn't been any pressure on it for a long time, because we wrapped up our food plots earlier in the year. We only put one fall food plot in, and it's basically been left alone for the most part. I've put cameras in and just kind of let them soak and haven't really touched them much, other than the one that's along a field edge that I can get to with my truck easily. And I was pretty pumped because I got, that deer Lucky that I'm targeting, and he's my number one buck to kill in PA this year. And that's the guy that I want to go after. And so I had, picked a stand location probably in probably like March or April, where I was like, after I had my late season encounters with this deer, I was like, I think I know how I can kill him. And kind of put that plan in place. And what you had said earlier, where like hunting out west changed your mindset a little bit about how you hunt as far as like hunting aggressively. 100% agree with that, because a lot of times, like most good whitetail hunters, at the beginning of the season, I'll often hunt a property, outside in, where I'll kind of nip at the edges during October until we get to later October. And then I'll start maybe making some moves closer to the interior where some of the better spots are and stuff like that. But I'll kind of chalk up the early season to some observation sits, and I'm really just trying not to mess anything up, during the early part of the season.
Yep.
But what I've come to realize is just after hunting the properties that I do hunt, that, not everybody hunts them well. I guess I'll say, you know what I mean? Or they don't hunt them the way I hunt them, you know, I guess is a better way to put it, where they're not as mindful about their entrance and exit. They're not as mindful about scent control. They're not as mindful about blowing into the interior of a property, you know, opening weekend and stuff like that. So I realized that if I had a pattern on a deer or thought I could kill a deer, like then I need to move on it. Like I need to hunt aggressively. I need to get into the stand that I think that I can see him in and have a cold front to do it on. So I actually dove into what I thought would probably be one of my better stand locations, which, you know, some people listening might cringe at that. But based on all the other factors on the property, it's like this was going to be my best opportunity to have the least amount of pressured deer and least amount of pressured sightings.
Right.
So I didn't hunt the morning, of course. I waited till the evening, so I did go check a camera or two in the morning in an area that I don't really hunt much on the mountain. I put cameras there for recon this year to see if there's anything using this one edge that I was really kind of curious about. And it, you know, I thought there were going to be deer using that edge. I checked my camera, there were 0 pictures, and that was like after it soaked for a month. So that pretty much told me what I needed to know there.
Right.
You know, that was really, it was a recon for next year to see if there's something I should be paying attention to in a different part of the property. Did that in the morning and then jumped into a tree stand. In the evening, of course, was using a mobile setup, you know what I mean, was because I didn't know what tree I wanted to get into. I just knew the area I needed to be in, and got into the tree. I think it was like 2:30. Beautiful day, man. Like it was just, you know, blue skies, 5 to 10 mile per hour wind, just like exactly what you want. You know what I mean? Just enough wind to where the deer aren't skittish to the wind, but and if you have a good wind, they think that the wind's in their favor. And that was kind of the setup that I had, where it's like the wind was almost wrong for me, and almost perfect for the deer, where I was sitting. So it was just like, I couldn't have had a better setup other than I was getting some swirling wind from time to time, which wasn't good. But by and large, my prevailing and what I predominantly had during the set was what I wanted. And so got in the stand. I was there 10 minutes. The biggest fisher I've ever seen walked out in front of me. So I saw a fisher like immediately. Those things make me a little nervous, man. Those things are kind of evil looking. I don't know if you've ever had any encounters with them. And they're not pleasant creatures either. So
no,
they're a little bit nasty.
Yeah.
And so I'm sitting there, you know, watch him for a while, and he moves on, and I'm sitting there just kind of, you know, taking it all in, the first set of the season, you know. And it's about 4:00, and there were some squirrels around and stuff like that. And I was listening to them and took some pictures of them, and, you know, had my camera with me, of course. And so got some B-roll film of them in case I decide to put some type of video together for funsies this year. And I keep hearing this sound behind me, and I just chalked it up to being a squirrel, you know. And I just happened to look over my left shoulder, and there's a 3-point standing behind me. He's almost under my stand at this point. He's probably at 7 yards. I didn't range him. Looked back over my shoulder a little further, and there's a forkhorn over there, 4-point standing there. And I was like, and it's like 4:00, so this is really early, right? I'm like, all right, so there's some deer moving. So I grabbed my bow because Lucky had been bachelored up with a group of bucks that he'd been running with for the year, for the summer. It was basically him, a 9-point. It's a really nice deer, 3-year-old, which is a rarity even in Pennsylvania. I think Lucky's a 4-year-old, and I think this other deer he's running with is a 3-year-old. And then he was always with, you know, what I call peckerheads, which are just like a 3-point and a forkhorn. That was usually what I would see him in the one food plot in with. So I'm sitting there, and they're kind of poking around behind me, and I just happen to look back a little further, and I look a little further behind my left shoulder, and who do I see? Lucky standing at 30 yards with the other 9-point. And I was like, you got to be kidding me. I was like, I can't believe that, like, I can't believe I figured this deer out and I knew where he was going to be. And I set the right stand, and he's standing 30 yards away from me. For whatever reason, I don't know what happened. I don't know if, like, another deer, because it turned out that it was those 4 deer, then there were 2 other ones behind them that I didn't see what they were. They could have been does or whatever. I don't know if one of the other deer stepped on a twig or what happened, but that lead little 3-point that was standing underneath my stand all of a sudden got nervous. And I don't know what it was, but he didn't blow out. Like, he just started doing that. You know how whenever they get, like, they just change their mannerisms and they stiffen up and they start backing up. Like, they don't turn around. They just start moving backwards. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
He started doing that, and I was like, and I couldn't figure out for the life of me what was going on, because I was looking around to see, like, is there something coming? Is there another group of deer that's coming up ahead of me that, like, that is making them nervous, that they don't know what it is or whatever. And I'm watching him, and I'm just thinking to myself, I'm like, just please don't blow out here. Please don't blow out here. Please don't blow out here. I didn't have a shot at Lucky. He was behind brush. He needed to walk maybe another 5 yards. And if he walked another 5 yards, I would have had a shot. If he would have just kept coming on the path he was coming, it would have been a 23-yard shot broadside. And I watched that deer for a while, watched him. He stood behind me for probably 5 minutes. Didn't snort, didn't stomp, didn't anything, just stood there. Kept my eye on Lucky. Never moved. Just kind of stood behind me, was munching on some acorns or whatever. I could see that he was chewing, so he was eating something. And then all of a sudden, the little 3-point just decides to turn around, and they walk from where they came. And that was it. And I had never been so mad at a group of deer in my life. I was pretty bummed out, man. Like, it was one of those things where, like you were saying, like where first time I got to grab my bow and the heart like was pumping, like got the buck fever shake, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like got the whole nine, and I was just pretty stoked. Like the one good takeaway was that I was right about where I thought he was bedding and how he was going to use the property and what terrain features he was going to use and what pinch point he was going to walk through. And so all those things were correct. If he wasn't still bachelored up, if our property still wasn't bachelored up at the moment, he would have been a dead deer if he was on his own.
Sure.
But, he's a smart deer. He let old Punky 3-point take the lead, and and that's why he's still walking around. So I don't know. I think, I don't know if I don't know what it is, the weekend of the 15th or something like that, or maybe the following weekend after that, depending on what the weather's looking like. I'll probably get one more hunt for him in October. He usually disappears and goes nocturnal from like roughly around the 19th, 20th, 22nd. Like I start historically getting only nocturnal pictures of him at that point, and he won't start reappearing in daylight until usually after Christmas. Like he'll start showing up in the late evenings, and when he gets back on his bed to food pattern is whenever I think he's probably killable again. During rut, I have no daylight pictures of that deer during rut. It's only early season and late season. So if I don't get it done here in the next 2 weeks, it probably won't get done until late season if he makes it through rifle season. So I probably have one more hunt for him.
Sure.
So that was my whitetail hunt, but it was exciting, man. I was stoked to see him, so I can't complain about it too much. I saw my target buck, which I know a lot of folks, they will target or pattern a deer and they can go a whole season and not see him in the timber at all. So I feel fortunate from that perspective.
Before we continue our conversation, I'd like to take a moment to talk about our partners at Exodus Outdoor Gear. You've heard me talk to guys on this show who shared testimonials about their experiences using Exodus trail cameras. I feel like I should add to it myself. I can honestly say that Exodus has played a large role in me learning enough about Lucky to hunt him effectively. The quality of the camera gives me the confidence to leave them hang all year round and know that they won't fail. I was able to put a lot of puzzle pieces together on this deer by leaving my cameras up all year this past year. I also let the cameras soak for months on end without worrying about battery life in preseason and during the season. The additional benefit of this is I keep pressure down in the areas I feel pretty certain Lucky is bedding, feeding, and or traveling. I've not harvested Lucky at this point, but I have seen him in 3 of the past 4 hunts, and I can honestly say that my Exodus cameras have played a large role in my sightings. And this, my friends, is an Exodus experience. If you'd like to make an Exodus experience of your own, you can use the promo code TRUTH at checkout and save $20 on a trail camera purchase at ExodusOutdoorGear.com. And now back to the show.
Yeah. No, and the buck that I sold tonight, I don't think I've ever seen. I'm going to go back and double check trail cameras, but I'm 99% sure I've never had a picture of him before. And I think we've actually talked about it before where, I'm a firm believer if you get, for every picture of a buck you get, I'm convinced there's at least 2 more that you haven't gotten pictures of.
Right.
Even if you're running multiple cameras. And I've never had a picture of this deer or the other 2 that were behind him. Now, the super spike, I think I sent you a text last week when I was in Missouri and said the only thing I saw was a couple of does and like a mega spike.
Yeah.
I believe this was that same mega spike. And when those geese started honking, he was the first one. I mean, they all kind of, flinched, but he was the one that bolted out, let out. You know what I mean?
Right.
And it's kind of like monkey see, monkey do. Mm-hmm. When he took off running, then the rest of them were like, I don't know why he's running, but I'm running too,
Right.
They just kind of followed. So
yeah.
I don't know. It sucks.
Yeah.
I'm just like, man, and once I looked at him and without binos, and I was like, man, that looks like a good deer. I really couldn't see his headgear that well,
right?
Other than that he had headgear. But I saw a big round belly,
Right.
And I'm like, that looks like a good deer. And I put binos on him and I'm like, you know what? That's a real good deer. I was like, I'm shooting that deer. So I did have a guy running a camera for me tonight, and I kind of glanced up at him and he was looking down at me and he was running video already. And I said, I'm shooting that deer tonight. I go, stay on him. And I said, just stay on him, and you tell me don't shoot if for some reason he steps behind. But he was in an open food plot, so that was going to be highly unlikely,
right, that
we were going to have that situation. So I had kind of already flipped the switch, reached for the bow, and the heart was pumping, but I wasn't all jittery. It was almost kind of like, you know what, I'm killing that deer.
Right.
And kind of locked into that mode or whatever. Now, if I had to sit there and watch him for a half hour, then that might have changed a little bit. But
right.
But yeah. Nonetheless, I was ready to shoot.
Yeah, man. It's
I thought, I mean, in all honesty, had the geese not come through there, I was probably going to be coming to full draw within about 10 seconds of that. The path he was taking. I was like, you know what? Screw taking a 60-yard shot. I'm just going to go ahead and let him walk on over to that scrape, and I'll, have a 50-yard shot,
Right. Yeah.
But
yeah, I'm just
nonetheless
hoping,
didn't work out.
Yeah, exactly, man. I mean,
it's play again.
I'm just hoping that my season doesn't turn into the season of near misses, because it's I had the close encounter and a couple close encounters or encounters in Montana, and was standing right beside my buddy who took the bull that we were both at full draw on, and then lo and behold, I put a plan in place to try to get after this specific deer. First time in my life I've ever targeted a single deer. You know what I mean? Like, it's the first time I've ever watched one for multiple years and then put a plan in place. Part of it because PA, it's hard to keep deer around for multiple years.
Sure.
So it's the first time I've ever picked one out and said, this is the only guy I'm hunting, and then actually got on him on the first hunt, and then there's another near miss, so it's, I couldn't see his full rack initially. Like, what tipped me off to who it was when I looked over, it's like I could see just his left main beam, and he's pretty distinguishable because he's the biggest deer on the property, so it's kind of easy to tell. But he also has a crab claw on his left main beam that's kind of really tight. Like, there's not a big spread in between that crab claw, and so that's kind of his distinguishing feature from a rack perspective, and that's kind of how I knew it was him immediately. But I'm just hoping it's not the season of near misses. I'll take the near misses so long as they're like at the end of the season. It's like I've had success. It'd be nice.
2014 season. There was a buck that I was hunting that I called Johnny Cash, and during the month of September, I had 3 encounters with him, all inside of 50 yards, and couldn't get a shot off. And then ended up killing him on October 4th on the 4th encounter. So there is hope. But man, after the first encounter, I was like, man, I hope that never happens again. Right. Second encounter, I'm like, okay, I've had 2 encounters. There's no way I'm going to have a third. Oh yeah, I had a third and I didn't get a shot off. And I'm like, okay, that's it. I'll never see him again. So, some of those deer, man, they can be kind of homebodies, and it sounds like you're doing everything right with your entry, exit, and scent control. I mean, you might be surprised. I mean, I'm not saying that you're going to end up having 4 encounters and then kill him. Hopefully you don't have to go through that, but right. Rest assured that it can still happen. So
Yeah.
you did your homework. You found him once. Now you just got to get on him the second time.
Yeah. And I feel good about seeing him, if I get the decent weather here in October again, I feel good about possibly seeing him again, only because, I mean, some of the other guys that hunt the property know that he's there. Now, I've told them that he was there because I share the trail camera pictures with them. I mean, one of them was my father-in-law, so it's like I shared the stuff with him. But they did ask me where I was sitting because I kind of left without anybody knowing I was leaving to go hunt that afternoon. My one buddy was there, and when people were asking me where I was going to hunt down there, since I knew no one else was really going to be down there, I told him a couple of different places that I was going to go. None of which were where I was actually going. and then
best way to do it.
Yeah, and then after I had the encounter or whatever, I got asked how was your hunt, and I was like, I saw Lucky, and one of them was like, really? I was like, yeah, and I was like, and that big 9 point that's running the property too, and they're like, really? Where were you sitting? And I was like, I'm not telling. Like, I was just like straight up like, I'm not telling you where I was sitting. I was like,
exactly.
And so then it was funny because I had a subsequent, follow up chat with that person, and they were asking me about, because they weren't there that weekend. They were asking me about like, well, did you check the camera here? Did you check the camera? Because they were trying to see where I went and where I didn't go. They were trying to narrow down. So everywhere they asked me, I went. I said, yeah, I was there. I walked through there. Oh, yeah, I walked through there. Yeah, I walked through there. So it made it sound like I was all over the property.
Sure.
Trying to throw him off my trail. I was like, I'm not trying to be a jerk, but I was like, I'll tell you at the end of the season what I know. Like,
yeah, no, seriously though, like when there's multiple people in an area and stuff, sometimes you got to do that,
Yeah. It's funny because it's my father-in-law. Like, so it's really kind of funny because there's this like, he's like my dad. Like, I love him to death. You know what I mean? But it's one of those things where he's like, you can tell he's kind of like, just why won't you tell me? Like,
yeah.
But family.
No, it is what it is. It's whitetail hunting sometimes.
That's right. I was like, there's family and then there's whitetail hunting. I'll talk to you after the season.
Right. Yep. Yep.
All right, man. Well, with that, dude, I think we can go ahead and wrap this one up. We gave our updates on Montana, cool. Our updates on our whitetail hunts, unless there's anything. Well, actually, let me ask you, like, when you put together the that short with your Montana hunt and you share out the snippet, are you sharing this for public consumption at some point? The what I'll call the trailer or whatever.
Yeah. So I did kind of I did some rough cut stuff, some of the interviews and some of that. I did put out an episode on Arrow Wild TV today, and the actual short film. Another PA boy, Wade James from Ad Liv Collective. Mm-hmm. He edits. This is the second short film that he's edited for me. And he's actually coming on board as the editor for Arrow Wild TV next year on the episodes. That'll be on Carbon TV. But the short film will be sent over to Badlands. Nice. So the sneak peek link that I sent you via text a little while ago, that's a sneak peek for you. And that'll be, like I said, sent over to Badlands. Hopefully it'll get picked up, and then that's when it'll get seen publicly for the first time.
Sweet.
And then after they release it, then I'll put it out on other social media outlets as well.
Nice.
But,
yeah. And I know,
so that's all wrapped up and done.
Nice. I'm looking forward to seeing the sneak peek, man. And I want to say, I know that we talked about this a little bit, and you kind of mentioned it there, just very with undertones. But I want to say congrats on the Carbon TV stuff, man. That's awesome. I always
appreciate that.
I think that it's killer that you're going to be on that platform and get some more exposure for Arrow Wild, which is great. And you're very deserving of it, man. Like you work hard at your craft. You're good people, and it's at least I think so. Don't
tell anybody else.
Yeah, I won't tell anybody else. I won't ruin your rep.
Yeah.
And I'm looking
street
forward.
Cred,
Yeah,
street cred.
You got to keep it. Got to keep it. But no, I'm looking forward to seeing this stuff on Carbon TV, man. And everyone out there, when this all comes out on Carbon TV, be sure to check it out. And give Arrow Wild some support in that. on that platform. But yeah, man, let's go ahead and shut this thing down. I got very little sleep for tomorrow and a train ride to New York for a long day of research. So I'm gonna go ahead and psych myself up for that now.
Yeah, sounds like a plan, man. Yeah, my phone's actually starting to beep, telling me that the battery's about dead, and I'm gonna go upstairs and hang out with the sister-in-law and get the kids tucked in. Actually, they're probably already tucked in, but grab some dinner and wake up and do it all over again tomorrow.
All right, folks, that is a wrap for today's show. I want to thank you all for tuning in, and be sure to follow along with us on the Truth from the Stand Instagram and Facebook pages. If you'd like to get involved in the show and would like to have John and I or a guest answer your questions, or if you'd just like to recommend a topic for discussion, please email me your suggestion at truthfromthestand@gmail.com, or you can click the email button on our Instagram account and leave us a message there as well. Also, if you have a free moment, it would be awesome if you'd leave us a 5-star rating on iTunes, and be sure to hit the subscribe button while you're there so you don't miss any of the upcoming episodes and guests. And finally, I need to give a big shout out to our partners that continue to make this podcast possible: Whitetail Institute of North America, Exodus Outdoor Gear, and Lone Wolf Portable Tree Stands. And until next time, we'll see you.
I could show you through the door. I ain't welcome anymore. Coming if it all. It takes a special knowing to colorful. Damaged heads, broken letters. Rationalize yourself in numbers, but I